Welcome to this training video, which will demonstrate the cleaning procedure for the Thermach AT-1200 powder feeder. Before we begin, there are 3 safety warnings. Please pause this video on each warning and read and understand them before proceeding. Again, please pause and read. And one last time. After this, you may proceed with the video. The first step is to turn the system off via the power button on the bottom. Note that the unit does not need to be tilted up to turn it off. We are doing it here to make it easier to see. Now, turn off the supply gas. To begin the cleaning process, use clean, dry, low-pressure air to blow any powder off the outside of the powder feeder. Notice that this is being done near the exhaust hood, wearing proper protection. When we turned the unit off initially, all pressure should have been released. This gauge should display a 0 reading. Disconnect the carrier gas hose from the upper housing of the canister. Next, remove the canister lid. Emptying the canister will require 2 people, one to hold the container and funnel, and the other to tilt and empty the powder canister. Note that the users are wearing proper eye and breathing protection. Release the latch on the main unit, tilting it so that any remaining contents can be poured out and into the container. At the torch, remove the powder hose. On the control panel, flip the Clean Mode switch. Notice now that we are tilting the entire unit so that the canister is pointed into the exhaust hood. Now, being sure that the exhaust fan is running, use the low-pressure air to blow out the powder hose that we previously removed from the torch. When this is done, tip the unit back into the normal position and turn the clean mode off. We will now remove the heater blanket. Begin by unplugging the power connector, then the springs. It will slide off. At the bottom, inside the canister, remove the large screw, then remove the tamper assembly. To remove the pressure relief tube, we will start at the open end of the canister using a 1/2 inch and a 9/16 inch open end wrench. On the opposite end, use a 5/8 and 9/16 inch wrench and loosen. Three socket head cap screws hold the canister to the lower housing. Use a 5/16 inch Allen wrench to remove them. We recommend removing the bottom 2 screws first, saving the top one for last. Use caution when removing the 3rd and final screw because this is all that's holding the canister in place. If not held in place when the screw is removed, it will fall. Once again, we are positioned near the exhaust hood. As we are working and cleaning the powder feeder, we are also periodically cleaning our work area. Please remember to have your respirator and eye protection on when doing so. Now, with the canister removed, use a 3/4 inch wrench to remove the nut, the washer, and the powder wheel. If the powder wheel seems to be stuck, direct compressed air onto the seam and it should free up. Once the wheel is removed, there are several pieces that must also be removed. First, the felt ring, then the white felt pad, followed by the white surface ring. Keep these together for later use. Note that if powder is present on the felt pad toward the seat or center, the maintenance interval should be increased, as this could cause damage to the internal housing. Now use the O-ring tool to remove the red backup ring and the small O-ring from the back of the powder wheel. Just a reminder that this entire process should be done at the exhaust hood, wearing appropriate protection including respirator and tight eye protection. Using a non-reactive fluid and cloth or cotton swabs, clean any small surfaces that might still contain residue. Note here that even after blowing the area with compressed air, there is still residue in the smaller indentations and grooves. Be careful not to neglect the inside of the powder wheel shaft. Dampen a cloth with the same non-reactive fluid and wipe the larger surfaces clean, again making sure there is no powder residue. Every opening, groove, or surface is a possible spot for powder to collect. Remove the small red O-ring shown here and clean with a swab. For the following steps, begin by undoing the captive screws and opening the front of the main unit. Next is the powder out tube. You will need 3 open-end wrenches for this, 2 5/8 inch and a 9/16 inch. At the bottom of the tube inside the unit, use the 9/16 inch wrench to loosen the nut. Now, at the outside bottom of the unit, put one of the 5/8 wrenches on the nut and the other on the nut inside the unit. Loosen both. Now, at the top of the tube, loosen the 9/16 inch nut, and you can now remove the tube. At the inside top of the unit are 3 5/16 inch Allen socket screws, the third of which is not visible in this image. These hold the lower housing to the top of the unit. Please remove them. Once the screws are removed, lift the lower housing out of the main unit. Once out, place the lower housing onto a surface that will hold it safely and remove the lovejoy using a 1/8 inch Allen wrench. Now remove the 4 5/64 inch Allen screws that secure the retaining ring. When the screws are removed, remove the plate and lift out the center shaft. Inside, you will find 2 O-rings that must be removed with an O-ring pick. These are referred to as the quad rings. Inspect these grooves for debris and any deformation. Here we are using an O-ring pick or a cotton or cloth swab to clean out the grooves and look for debris. When all is clean, locate the O-ring replacements from the new O-ring kit. After cleaning, lube these grooves and the 2 new O-rings from the kit and replace them. Now we will check the bearing to be sure it rotates smoothly with no rough or gravelly feeling. Also, if grease is coming out of the bearing, it must be replaced. To replace it, use a screwdriver to pry back the tang in the locking nut. Use the special tool to loosen the locking nut as demonstrated here. Remove the locking nut, then the locking washer. Tap the bearing until it comes loose. Inspect the surface where the quad rings rest, ensuring that there are no worn spots. If there are, replace the shaft. Assuming there aren't, install the new bearing, the locking washer, and the locking nut. When retightening, position it so one of the tabs in the locking washer lines up with one of the 4 grooves in the locking nut, so the tab can be bent back up and into the groove. Once tightened, remove the tool. Now use a small screwdriver and a mallet to carefully bend the tab up and into the groove. We will now put the shaft assembly back into the lower housing. If necessary, a few gentle taps with the mallet will help to seat it properly. Replace the retaining ring and secure it with the 4 5/64" Allen screws. There is a notch in the shaft referred to as the keyway. The key is simply a square piece that, when inserted in the keyway, holds everything in place. Put the key back into the keyway and slide the lovejoy back on, aligning the keyway in the lovejoy with the key and tightening it with the 1/8" Allen wrench. At this point, we will replace all of the pads and rings in the lower housing. We will start with the red rubber backup ring. In the groove, there is a hole. Start at the hole and push the ring in, keeping the hole visible when complete. Notice the sides of the ring. 2 sides are smoother, while the other 2 sides show a rough side. Place the ring in the groove with the smooth sides facing up and down. Once in place, check to be sure that the previously mentioned hole is visible and not covered by the ring. Next, place the powder out sleeve into the new surface ring. On a flat surface, press this so the sleeve goes in halfway through the ring. Now, place the surface ring onto the red ring with the powder out sleeve going into the hole left visible in the previous step. Next, replace the white felt pad and the gray felt ring. Now place the new barrier ring in the slot on the powder wheel, turn it over, and place it over the shaft, replacing the washer and retaining nut. This can be tightened by hand for now. It will be completely tightened once it's back on the powder feeder. Put the lower lovejoy onto the lower coupler inside the main unit, then replace the lower canister assembly. Notice the powder tube fitting. It goes into the hole shown by the arrow. Note that you can reach inside and turn the lower lovejoy so the two will align. We will now reinstall the socket head screws to secure the lower housing to the cabinet. Place all 3 in by hand, then tighten them with the wrench. Reinstalling the powder out tube is next. Position it behind the circuit board before attaching the tube itself. Screw it in by hand at the top first, then the bottom. Once in place, at the bottom, use the 2 5/8" wrenches to tighten the nut. Then do the same at the top. Our work inside the main unit is complete, so we will close the cover and secure the latches. Using a 3/4" wrench, turn the nut on the powder wheel until it stops. Once stopped, use the palm of your hand to tap the wrench twice. This is now tightened properly. No, really. Turning the canister over, remove the pressure balance tube. Simply loosen the nuts and pull the tube straight out. Next, locate and remove the three 5/32 inch Allen screws. Remove these and lift the upper housing off. Remove and discard the O-ring. As you can see, there's an accumulation of powder here. Using a damp cloth with a non-reactive fluid, remove all traces of powder from this area. This is very important. Looking at the upper housing, inspect the powder out insert. If the hole in the insert itself is oblong, it is worn and must be repaired or replaced. This is a precision operation and must be done at the Thermach facility. Remove the blue wiper ring. Simply push the ring inward and pull it out. Again, there will be a powder residue, so using a swab and a moistened towel, be sure all powder is removed. Locate the new wiper ring in the kit and replace. Notice that the ridge in the inner diameter of the ring faces upward. Turn the assembly over, remove the remaining O-rings, and be sure all is clean and free of powder. And just a reminder, always be sure to keep the work area clean. Back to the canister, begin by replacing the O-ring. In the upper housing, replace the orange O-rings. These are the larger of the set of small O-rings available. This is important. When replacing the upper housing, be sure the two holes with the orange O-rings are positioned so they are on either side of the hole shown by the arrow. Replace and partially tighten the 5/32 inch Allen bolts. When all three are in place, they can now be fully tightened, starting with the rear screw, then the remaining two. Tightening it this way helps seal it completely, preventing leaks. We will now reattach the pressure balance tube. As always, before doing so, be sure there is no residual powder. Finger tighten the nuts, and then with a 1/2 inch and a 9/16 inch wrench, they can be fully tightened. Be careful not to over-tighten. Now, using an O-ring pick, remove the O-ring from the inside of the lid. Like other parts, we will clean the groove with a swab and wipe the glass surface, being sure all traces of powder are gone from these parts. Replace the O-ring with the new one from the kit. No lube is required for this ring. With a damp cloth using a non-reactive cleaning fluid, wipe the interior surfaces of the canister, again removing all traces of powder. When reinstalling the lid, notice the white arrow. This should be pointing at the gauge. The latches will line up and it can be engaged. Before reinstalling the canister, replace the large O-ring on the powder wheel and the small orange O-ring as shown by the arrow. Do a final inspection for any powder residue and clean it if necessary. With the gauge positioned upward, replace the canister. While holding the canister, replace the top bolt to hold it in place. Now replace the other two bolts and tighten all three. Reinstall the pressure relief tube using a 1/2 inch and a 9/16 inch wrench for the top and a 5/8 inch and 9/16 wrench for the bottom. These should be secure but not overly tight. The heater blanket is next. Carefully slide it around the canister inside the various tubes and other parts, securing it with the springs. Connect the power in the lower corner. To replace the tamper assembly, we must first remove the canister lid. Place it in, securing it first hand tight, then finally with a large flathead screwdriver. Not surprisingly, after moving and removing parts, there may still be some residual powder. If so, clean it off in the usual manner, wipe the lid and replace it. This completes the cleaning portion of the process and this video. Upon completion, Thermach highly recommends a pressure check, which is addressed in another video.